Welcome back to Where the Ramp Ends. I'm Bryce,
And I'm Summer.
and today we have the incredible Dr. Mays, Dr. Brad Mays. Dr. Brad, welcome to Where the Ramp Ends. We are so excited to have you, my friend.
I'm very glad to be here. I'm honored. Thank you.
So, Brad, if you want to introduce yourself briefly to our listeners and get a little more insight on who Dr. Brad Mays is, I'm sure they would love it.
Sure. As Bryce said, my name is Dr. Bradley Mays. I am the Advocacy Training Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Council of Oklahoma. I get to coordinate wonderful advocacy programs for high school students and adults who want to make lives of people with disabilities better, right? And so I'm honored to get to do that every day and get to share my journey as a man with cerebral palsy.
Yes, we both happen to have the palsy power, and we met when Summer and I were both graduates of Partners in Policy Making.
Yeah,
And
you guys were really nice students, and not just because you give me great compliments.
well, as
You
a
both work really hard. So
right, as a fellow brother with cerebral palsy, we gotta keep, we gotta keep you fired up. That's kind of our job. So, Brad, tell us a little bit of what it was like to grow up with as a young man with cerebral palsy.
are you wanting from childhood or from
Wherever
early
you feel
adulthood?
wherever
Okay,
you
well,
feel you wanna start.
Yeah, I was, born in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I was a surprise to my parents. They knew I was coming, but they didn't know I was gonna be so early. I was 2 months premature. I weighed 3 pounds and 11 ounces. I don't think there's anything on my body that weighs less than 3 pounds and 11 ounces now, so quite the change. You know, growing up and I was born in 1980, so growing up, my parents did the best they could with, the resources we had. The internet did not really come into play till I was about 12 or 13 years old. A lot of, my mom and dad they still are, but tremendous advocates for me. And they never lowered expectations. They always expected a lot from me and pushed me to do my best and
Uh,
try my best. And, they never treated me as though I had a disability. They always, wanted me to be with other kids, and I was, I knew I was a little different in terms of, I used to walk with a walker, and uh, I knew that. In fact, when I was about, I think, preschool, I kind of had my first experience of, recognizing that I was different because I had a kid come up to me at recess and he said, "Are you crickled?" And I didn't know what he meant. And I went home and I said, "Mom, am I crickled?" He said crippled, okay? I pronounced it as crickled. And I remember saying that to my mother, and I remember my mom bursting into tears. She was like that. I knew at that point I was a little different in terms of my mobility and my walker. That was kind of my first introduction to sort of my disability and kind of having to advocate for myself and things like that. So, but I remember my mom being very upset. I knew the word crippled was very hurtful to my mom. She didn't like that word, and that's not a word that I used at all growing up. But I was involved in Cub Scouts and you know, sports teams. We didn't have sports teams when I was growing up in terms of like wheelchair sports. So I was involved keeping statistics in middle school and high school for my basketball and football teams. Um, in many ways, I was more competitive than my my teams were. I would yell and yell at them to play harder. And I don't know. Sometimes I think they were a little annoyed by me for being so fired up, but I love to win. I love sports. I love to win. I'm a huge OU football fan, Thunder fan, which they're doing great right now in the playoffs, so that's always good. I've just I've just been blessed to get to do things kind of in spite of my challenges. It's never easy, and I don't know. I think now I would tell you that having a disability, I wouldn't change it, but like overall, I wouldn't change it because I think it's given me a good perspective about life, but I would be lying if I said there are days when I wish I didn't have to deal with the stuff that I have to deal with, like tasks that I think some people deem to be normal, they're really hard. Like basic day-to-day things, just the time it takes to do things like shower and dress and all those things. It's
Yes.
a lot, and I'm sure, Bryce, I'm sure you can identify with that, but it's something that I think most people are curious about, and perhaps they're a little nervous to ask me about, but I always tell people that I'm an open book, and I like the questions, I appreciate the questions. I would much rather someone ask me a question about my life than make an assumption, so
Amen, brother.
thank you. Um,
Brad, you said you're at and Bryce and I know that what a big OU fan you are.
yes.
Um, but, um, you have a best friend that's actually an OSU fan or an OSU grad, and tell us about the story about how you guys met.
Oh, yes, so I believe you're speaking about my friend named Ben, and Ben and I met, in the 6th grade, so let me backtrack a little bit. So, in Bartlesville, when I was growing up, there were 2 middle schools, and they fed into 1 high school, but, the middle school I was supposed to attend, was not accessible, it was not accessible, and that was roughly around the time that the ADA was passed. But my parents, they were like, "Well, where's Brad gonna go?" And, my school system basically said, "Well, Brad can go to the other middle school because it's more accessible." However, that school, was not where the kids from my elementary school went to school. So I left, a bunch of friends behind in the 5th grade, and when I went to 6th grade, to the new school, to the more accessible school, I had to leave those friends behind and meet new ones, which was hard. 6th grade, I think, is the hardest grade, or whenever you make that switch from elementary to middle school
I
because of
agree.
various factors. It's very hard, very awkward for everybody, not just for somebody with a disability, okay? But it was a challenge, and you get a little older and you start to become more self-conscious about yourself and how people view you, and I was no different. I think um, you know, going into middle school, I was nervous because I didn't know anybody, so I had to kind of, start over and make new friends, and I was able to do that. Most of the kids in that school were very, very good to me, many of whom I'm still friends with to this day. But, one of my really good friends I met, this sounds kinda weird, but I met him because of, the IEP, or the Individualized Education Plan. I had an IEP in middle school, and my accommodations were I I don't wanna minimize them, but to me, they weren't minimal because they were, I had an accommodation to, leave class 5 minutes early because in middle school, every class period, you would switch classrooms
Yep.
to go to the next class, and so I would leave 5 minutes early to allow myself time to use the restroom if I needed to, or to get something from my locker and then to make it to the next class. But some of those classrooms were kind of far apart. And so one of my accommodations, we ended up having a classmate push me from class to class. And one of those classmates ended up becoming one of my very best friends, and he still is to this day. He's an engineer in Tulsa, and he went to OSU, and I did not. Obviously, I chose crimson instead of orange, but we're still very good friends, and I love sports. He doesn't care a lick about sports, so I guess maybe that's why we're still great friends now. But he's a great guy, and but we met because of the IEP. Like I don't know if I mean he kind of volunteered to help me, and he I think he did it, because he was a wanted to be helpful, but he got to know me as a person, and um, we got into some not trouble when I was in middle school, but there were a few times where, I'll just say we were going way too fast down the hallways of Madison Middle School, and I might have run over a few toes that I shouldn't have, maybe because he was a reckless driver, but also maybe because I was encouraging him to run faster, so, um yeah, he's been my one of my great friends for over 30 years now, and gosh, almost 35 years. So, yeah, it's a great friendship, and that's sort of a credit to the IEP because who knows if I would have become friends with him if he wasn't quote unquote assigned to help me initially, but we were friends long after that, just that uh, instance. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good memory, Summer.
Well, I've got a few more.
Yeah, well, there you
Uh,
go.
you actually made you actually made the newspaper one time,
I did a couple times, yeah.
a couple of
So
times,
yeah.
but you weren't represented in the best way.
No.
Do you mind telling that story?
Oh gosh. Well, there were a few times that I was in the local newspaper, and all of those times feature an awkward photo of me in action. I guess is probably the best way to put it. Um, One of which, actually so I mentioned a little while ago that I was involved in different activities, growing up. I failed to mention one of the things that I did was, therapeutic horseback riding,
Mhm.
which was we did it because, it's a really good hamstring stretch. I don't know if Bryce, if you've talked about this on the podcast, but, our muscles as people with CP are very tight, in a lot
Yes,
of cases, and so I did therapeutic horseback riding during middle school as a means of physical therapy
I did
because
the same.
y yeah, so horses are wide, right? But, because they're so wide, that offers, a really good hamstring stretch, and so I would do that after school, like, once a week, like, all through middle school, I did that. Maybe I can't remember. Maybe I started late elementary on into middle school, maybe even early high school. I did it for a while, and one of the local news stations one of the news stations out of Tulsa, did a story about the program that I was in, and they came and they did a news story, and they, like, filmed the place and the horses, and they did a story about me. I think there's video footage of me on a horse in about 1993 or 4, shooting baskets. I'm sure you can find it in the basement of KOTV in Tulsa. But and then the local paper, they also did a story about that, and there's a still photo of me shooting a basketball, which was my favorite thing to do. I got to shoot baskets at the end of the sessions off the top of a horse. I love basketball, and I got to do that, and they took a picture and wrote an article about me and the therapeutic horseback riding, stables, and it was a great but the photo was really awkward. I had my mouth wide open, and I don't have the best form shooting a basketball, so it was pretty silly. But my parents said, "Hey, Brad," this is a little earlier. This might have been elementary school. They said, "Hey, Brad, like you need to send this article to Michael Jordan." I was like, because he was my favorite player, and this was about 1990. He was just scratching sort of the height of his powers. Not world famous at that point, but he was you could tell he was heading that way, much like SGA. And so I did. I wrote him a letter and I sent him a newspaper article. And about 3 weeks later, I got a poster in the mail, and it was in a long cardboard box. And the box said, "One Magnificent Mile, Chicago, Illinois," and it had the Jumpman logo on the side. That's all over everywhere now. And I open up this box, and there's this poster, and I actually have it on my wall right now. It's the only poster I have left on my wall. And it says, "To Brad, best wishes, Michael Jordan." And I was so thrilled as a 8 or 9-year-old,
Wow.
10-year-old, and I ended up taking it to school, and I said, "Mom, Dad, even the 4th and 5th graders think I'm cool." And so that was, sort of a benefit of some of the therapy that I did as a kid was, getting Michael Jordan's autograph as a result. He's my favorite athlete of all time, and it's really cool stuff. And just love sports and was always into sports. And so,
Yeah.
and then yeah, and there's another picture. Probably this is probably what Summer was referring to. There was another picture of me. Um, I I kept stats for football and basketball in high school, and at the beginning or in fall of my senior year, the football team decided they were going to bleach their hair. And that was right about the time Eminem was becoming famous too.
Uh,
So they were like, "Brad, you
oh,
got to do it." They're like, "You don't play, but you're with us every game. Like you're part of the team. You got to do it." And I was like, "All right." So I bleached my hair blonde, like we're talking bright, bright blonde, and they ended up. I got my picture taken. They put it in the paper and front page, full color, and it said "Unsung Hero." And I like to post it every now and then whenever it pops up on my Facebook memories, 'cause, if you might as well get a laugh out of it. So,
right.
yeah, I've been in the newspaper for some funny reasons, but it's all been good stuff. And, I'll tell you, on the picture with the, blonde hair, the title of the picture, it said "Unsung Hero," and I don't really know why, and that's sort of something I struggle with as a person with a disability. I think they titled it that because, you know, in some ways, I guess, I was an inspiration to the team or to the town because, I kept the stats and I was on the sideline and always participated, and I understand some people get inspired by that, but to me, and I don't have a problem with being considered an inspiration or inspiring, but to me, that's only part of who I am, right?
Right.
It's not the
Exactly.
totality
Right.
of me.
Yep.
And so I kind of have mixed feelings about it, but overall, it's a positive. Like I don't not want to inspire someone. I just don't want to be sort of a figurehead for inspiration because there's more depth to me and others with disabilities than just what we have to overcome in terms of our disabilities day to day. Like there's more to me than just my wheelchair or whatever, right? So that's
You
sort
Well,
of
and
know,
my
I think
perspective on that.
and and please correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
but I think this is from I mean, from my perspective, like, my daughter being in the mainstream classroom, I want her to be part of the class. I don't want her to
absolutely.
be like the class mascot
Right.
Right.
or I mean, am I saying that, does that
I
Uh-huh.
make
think I think
Yeah,
that's right. And
absolutely.
there are certainly times when I've felt that way in certain situations.
okay,
I mean,
yeah.
on some level, I understand it because you do want depending on what it is, you want representation, right? It's always
Right.
nice to see people with disabilities represented. And, I think that's where we have to be careful not to, treat people like you said, like mascots
Right.
or
Yeah.
just inspirational figures. Because again, I have aspirations that extend far beyond just disability
Absolutely.
issues. So
Yes.
And I have a similar story, to Brad's. When I was in high school, I was the manager and statistician for my high school, and then my senior year, we made it all the way to the state championship for basketball. And I
you got to
remember
experience a lot more winning than I did.
I'm guessing so. And I remember sitting in the locker room for the state championship final, and I remember them saying, "We wanna win it for Bryce." And I don't and rem I don't remember feeling a certain, way, but we didn't
Yeah,
end up winning. We got, but at the same time, I don't ever wanna feel you kn like I'm an inspiration or anything. I'm just a normal guy with cerebral palsy trying to live his life.
yeah. I
You
think
Yeah.
know,
I think
I
that's
I
I think
appreciate the
mhm,
sentiment,
yeah,
and I appreciate that I help people understand, but I don't really wanna be called an inspiration because I don't feel like I'm doing
yeah,
anything inspiring. I'm
yeah.
just living my
We're
life.
just we're just trying to make it day by day, right? It's every day is a new challenge, and it's you know we we have to maybe do some extra things that others with disabilities don't have to do. But I think our aspirations are all very similar, right? Like
Right.
we want our families to be well. We want us to live good lives and things like that. So
I mean, I
yeah,
don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but living with cerebral palsy in the wintertime is not for the weak at heart.
it's not. No, not at all.
Well, Brad, let's take an opportunity right now. I know parents that have children that have cerebral palsy and they're, navigating this advocacy journey.
Mhm,
If you if you were speaking to a mom or dad that has like a 9 or 10-year-old that has cerebral palsy, is there
mhm.
any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I would say, to involve them in as much as they're able to do, as much as they wanna do, to encourage them to try new things, and, I know it's hard, right? Because, and my parents are still this way. I'm 45 years old, and my parents are in their 70s now, and they still worry about me, like, you know, it doesn't matter how old I get, I'll be 70 and they'll be 90 and they'll be worried about me. But, on some level, you gotta be willing to, take risks, right? And I
Yes.
can't remember if it was Guy or Al, um, who said there's dignity in risk, and there is. And so, I would
Yeah.
say to not live in fear and to encourage your sons or daughters to participate and to, you know, just experience things, right? And so,
So,
yeah.
yeah, we talk about dignity of risk a lot on here.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Was there any time that your parents, let you fail at any point that kinda sticks out to
Well, I
you?
can't I can't think of, a specific instance of like, "Oh, we're gonna see, how Brad does without us," but I speaking from experience, when I was, making the transition from high school to college, um, the rules are different now in terms of, how IEPs, like what students are required to attend and participate in. For me, back in 1999, when I was a senior, I attended my exit IEP meeting my senior year. Um, Before that, it was my mom or my dad or both of them that went to the meetings, not me. Like they went in. on my behalf, and it what they didn't keep anything from me, but I wasn't a part of the meetings. But when I went to my exit IEP meeting, they told me, they said, "Brad," they said, "you've got really good grades." I was in the general education classroom the entire time. You're in the National Honor Society, like, you're ready for college. And I think maybe from an academic standpoint, I was, but I didn't realize, like, all the other things that college would entail, like, just the day to day and the importance of asking others for help. I
Yes.
didn't realize how much my mom and dad did for me. And so, and I'll never forget the first night I went to OU, and my mom and dad dropped me off, like, when I moved in. Like, my mom was in tears, like, she was kinda, like, beside herself, and I remember her saying, like, "If you call me if you call me if you need," and I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "I'll be fine," right? I mean, I talked to her probably every day, but, that first 2 years really, you very difficult, like, extremely difficult, because I had this mindset of, like, "Well, I have to prove myself. I have to prove to the other people without disabilities that I belong at OU." And
Mhm.
at that point, I was very self-conscious about, being in a wheelchair and how I
Mhm.
looked and, like, all the things. I wanted to, be impressive and, uh, and prove to people that I belonged. And so as a result, I didn't ask for help, in a lot of cases where I needed to. I stayed up really late at night and ate poorly. I'll share this. My dad will never let me live this down. I was hungry at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a pizza place in Norman called Pizza Shuttle, and they're open till like 3 a.m. And I was desperate. I didn't even have any cash, and so I ended up ordering a $7 pizza. I wrote a $7 check to pay for that pizza at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Just really wrong on a lot of levels, but I was desperate. And my dad, he's like, "You wrote a $7 check for pizza?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was desperate, like," but I didn't take care of myself. And I stayed up, all hours of the night, and it was all an effort to be cool. And that wasn't cool because it cost me, like, my GPA suffered. I went from, National Honor Society honor roll to, academic probation my first year at OU. And I remember my dad telling me after my first year, he's like, "Brad, if you don't figure this out, you're not gonna be there." And at that point, I was crushed because I was like, "I love it here. Like, I love the people here. Like, OU is like my dream. I love it." Like, in fact, it was the only place I even applied to out of high school. I did tour, other places. I toured OSU, and a couple other schools, but in my heart of hearts, I knew, and it probably would have been easier for me to go to Stillwater because I did have my friend that I grew up with who went to school there, and I knew some other people at OSU. I knew people from Bartlesville at OU as well, but they weren't my close friends. I mean, they would help me if I saw them on campus, right, or say hi to me, but we weren't close, so we didn't hang out a lot at OU. And so I suffered, like, a lot of it was my own doing. And so I can't say that my parents were like, "Oh, well, he'll find." I don't think they wanted me to get on academic probation because I didn't know how to ask for help or seek
Right.
accommodations, but that was what happened. I didn't know
Yeah.
what I needed to do, and I learned, through fire, really.
Yeah.
You said
But it got
you said
that was you were able to make that choice, that you get to own that choice.
Mhm.
And to me, it sounds like a lot of, mistakes that a lot of college kids make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
it's not unique to me or because I have a disability, but it's like what I've gone through, and I was able to use that experience and kind of learn from it, and make a 180 and move forwards. You know, I I don't some of these things that I've gone through, I really wouldn't wish on anybody, but it's sort of led me to, who I am, and so I am grateful for those aspects of it.
yeah. Sorry, Bryce, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I was just saying, like, I have, similar, because I'm also a college graduate and
Yeah,
the first, year of college, I was also National Honor Society and two-time academic All-American. And, I
yeah,
thought I had life figured out. And then
yeah,
life kicked me in the face.
yeah,
It was like,
yeah,
you really don't.
right.
And
What's the phrase, "Life comes at you quick"? I mean, yeah, that's
yes.
very
And
true.
I thought that I'm gonna tell a brief story because, Brad, you'll be able to get this. I also had, snacks and, I thought that I had everything figured out, and then I had my first English composition class. I'll never forget this. I turned in my first paper, and on the comments of the paper, he said, "Delete half of it, it sucks." And I came to my professor's office during office hours, and I said, "What do you mean it sucks? I had a 4.0 GPA in high school." And he said, "Welcome to college, son."
Well, there yeah, you gotta welcome me, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yep,
But I also, was the person that wanted to impress everybody and didn't ask for help. I mean,
yeah,
I struggled even
yeah,
my brother was my aide in college, and I even struggled asking my brother to help me. So
yeah,
hearing you talk about that eases my Uh, because I struggled
yeah,
that for a long time. I didn't like who I was in college because I put so much pressure on myself, you know, to b to
mhm,
overexceed and to overimpress to where I got burned out, where I took a semester off because I couldn't take it anymore because I put so much pressure on myself,
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
and it's
Brad,
hard.
it is.
let's get a little bit into advocacy and,
Sure,
what you do. Do you
okay,
wanna
yes,
give, just, like, a brief overview of we talk a lot about partners on here, and I
you
almost
guys
feel
recruit for me, and I
we
We
appreciate
yeah,
that,
do.
yeah,
it's completely unintended, but the subject just keeps coming up, and
yeah,
there's a
right,
reason for that,
yeah,
and, we don't set out to find partners in policymaking grads,
They just
but
show up, they flock to us.
they flock
yeah,
to us,
that's very good, yes,
and I think
yeah.
it's because it's such an amazing program, but we've never really gone into much detail about what Partners does. Do you wanna tell a little bit about Partners in Policymaking?
Yeah. So, as Summer and Bryce have mentioned, partners in policymaking, they are graduates. They took part in my class. Summer, was it last year for you? I know it was for last year for you, Bryce. You were
Yeah,
both in the same class, right?
yeah,
So, so yeah. So it's an 8 month long legislative advocacy training program on disability issues and disability issues across the lifespan. And I say 8 months. We meet 7 weekends out of the year, 1 weekend per month. I say eight because we take a break in December. So we'll go through November and typically beginning uh, late August or early September and meet once a month and stop in after November, take a break in December, and then resume in the spring and go through April. So it's 7 sessions, and we typically have a variety of topics presented each month. Uh, some speakers here locally in Oklahoma and also nationally. who come in and share about disability issues and advocacy. And advocacy is so important because
Mhm.
that's how we make things better. I think there are a lot of cases where if you're not in this world, you don't understand, and
Correct.
that's okay. That's okay, right? I mean, we're all here to learn. I don't. And I think, I mean, I have credentials now. I have doctor in front of my name or PhD behind my name, right? But that only makes me an expert in the things that I've researched and my life, right? Disability is so complex and there are so many issues. Bryce and Summer's daughter, I mean, all of us have certain experiences that are unique to
Mhm.
disability, right? But
Right.
they they're only similar, right? They're not carbon copies. They could be close, but every day is a learning experience. And so that's why a class like Partners that teaches about legislative advocacy, which again is important because we want people to vote and to learn about the issues that impact people with disabilities' lives, because voting creates systems change and that leads to better outcomes and potentially better lives for people with disabilities. And you know learning, I mean, it shouldn't stop, right? Disability is unique and it's ever changing. Again, we have some commonalities, some similar experiences, but Bryce, your experience as a man with cerebral palsy is going to be a little bit different than mine, even though there are
Right.
some similar things that we face, right? And the
Right.
same with Summer's daughter. She's young, right? And I'm sure she's every day she's learning something new about life. And, I I just hope that partners and things like partners helps, you know, Summer's daughter and others with disabilities have it easier than you've had it and I've had it. I mean, that's really what I want is for people to
Absolutely.
not go through what I've gone through. And I say this as a man who's lived a pretty good life. I recognize that not everybody has the support system that I've had, right? But even though there are times when I still feel like a burden, you know,
Absolutely.
I still feel like a burden to others. I mean, my parents would never agree with that
No.
sentiment, but that's how I feel, right? Because life it's not easy and it's not gotten easier. I thought when I was younger that adults would be nicer and like more understanding. I That's not the case to me. I think
Yeah.
kids are more innocent and you think I mean, they've said some awful things, when I was growing up, but for the most part they treated me really well. But really now I think adults need the education more so than even
Uh-huh.
kids, because kids have an innocence that adults don't have. And I think adults, especially those who don't have friends with disabilities or don't have family members with disabilities or don't have disabilities themselves, they just don't have that perspective.
Yep.
And I understand that life is busy and you kind of get wrapped up in your own thing and you may not think about it, but I always talk about this. Even if you're not directly impacted by disability, well, you're going to get older, right? And when you get older, your mobility changes, you start to hurt more just because, people talk about 40 and I'm 45 now, but I remember my 40th. I feel like I woke up hurting more on the day of my 40th than I did when I was 39 and 364. I mean, you feel different when you get older and you age and you move slower and you don't want to be treated or don't want to be treated differently because of it. And so I feel like partners is just very important, not only for education about disability issues, but just just the resources and the understanding that, like, there are there are people going through similar experiences that you might be going through, and you might not feel like um, you have that support, but I feel like in partners, you gain that support, and you gain friendships and resources. We're hopeful that those will last lifelong, right? Because disability is not, it doesn't end tomorrow, right? It's continuous, and that life experience is continuous. And so, of course, like partners, it really scratches the surface, but it's so impactful just in terms of not only the resources that we give, but just the connections that are made, right? Like
Yeah.
I you guys have you guys have a podcast, that's amazing to me that I'm sitting here on a podcast with the both of you, and I've seen all of the guests you've had, and I would say stand by. I'll sit by what I said, but, I'm probably the least famous person on this podcast, but that's okay, like,
Imma
that's not
stop
why
you
I'm doing
there, Imma
this.
stop you there. It was because of your tutelage and your believing in us that Summer and I
Uh,
started this journey. It was because
We we are results of Brad Mays.
oh, wow, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, this is being recorded, so this is great.
I will say that one of the biggest things that I took away from partners is the realization that legislators are not experts in
No.
on everything they're
They're
voting
not.
on.
They don't know, and they need to be educated, and they need
Yet
their constituents to educate them, and I know you guys have done that, and I know the recent class that just graduated here 2 weeks ago, they're doing that, and several others from other classes they're doing that. They don't know, and I think
they
when we
yeah,
educate them, you know, they're like, there's sort of that aha moment, like, "Oh,
right.
yeah, that's
oh,
important," and
Yeah,
so
it's so and yeah, it's so important for everybody t just like you were saying, everybody's story is different, and so that's why it's so important that everyone's story is told.
yeah,
These legislators are voting on hundreds of reading through hundreds of
yeah.
bills, and if they don't know, they don't
Yeah.
know. If we don't
If they're not confronted with it, they're not gonna know unless,
they're not gonna know, so
and we've met a couple legislators who happen to have family members or children with disabilities, so they're more aware of things that are going on, but again, if you don't know, if you're not around it, you're not gonna know, and
right.
and
yeah,
that's the big thing I said earlier is I really want people to ask me questions to
Yes.
learn about
I'm that way too.
not everybody is like me, not everybody likes to talk about themselves. I'm an open book. I will talk. It's interesting. I consider myself to be actually very shy, but there are certain times when can't stop talking. So in many ways I'm like one of the loudest shy people you'll meet, but I've always been open, and perhaps that's because my disability is visible. You can see it. I can't hide it. And so why not be upfront
Right,
about, some of my struggles? Because I want people to know me as a person and not see my wheelchair and get scared. And I know that's happened a lot in terms of like fear, and that's impacted me, uh looking for jobs, it's impacted me socially, it's impacted me in a variety of ways, and I'm trying to lessen that fear, and
right,
by being open and talking to people, and one of the things I can do is you know, get to talk to those legislators and the people and partners and just continually learn. And you guys have taught me a lot. It's not me or the speakers that we have or Jen teaching you. You're teaching us as well, right? So it's all mutually beneficial.
Brad, what's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself since you've taken over partners?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have a specific answer, but I, I will, I think, I think hearing from you guys and from other, former students, current students who come up to me and sort of talk about the impact of partners and some of the things that I've told them about, um, my perspective and my experiences. I think it's given me a sense of it's given me more of a sense of like my value and like in terms of my impact. Sometimes I feel like I don't have like a big impact, and so partners has like shown me that like it's
Yes,
helped me like I mean I'll be vulnerable like it's helped me feel better about myself. It's probably the best way to put it. Like
yeah,
I know that there's a purpose for what, we're doing, and
absolutely.
so
And being able to serve with you on the council, I consider you and Jen family. I know Summer and I talk about this all the time, but you really do, guys, change people's lives. I want you to know that. Like,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. Yeah.
Brad, can you give us some examples of self advocates in Oklahoma that are creating real change, like on any level?
Well, um, yeah, so, obviously you 2, right? You 2 are I mean, that's true, right? Um, I think there are many other people are doing as well. And my colleague Morgan, you've had her
yes,
on, and what she does on a day-to-day basis. She's a partners grad, but she's getting to help, self advocates, teach others as well. And many of them, I don't think they've had necessarily paid positions before this. I think Bryce, you're part of that group, and
yes, I
I
am.
mean,
I'm
you guys do great work. And there's a lot of other examples too of partners grads who are working to have um, legislation passed and things like that. It's escaping. They're escaping me right now, but I'm like I know that they're doing fantastic, and they haven't stopped advocating just because the class ends.
There was a group, including Morgan, that got to tell their stories at the Capitol the other
yeah,
day. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, so there's a task force at the state capitol, um, and it was called rethinking sub minimum wage for people with disabilities. There are some companies and some places of employment that I I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they can pay people with disabilities below minimum wage, and I probably 10 or 15 others got to speak about that, and how I spoke about how there's nothing sub about a person with a disability, and the prefix sub has a lot of meanings, and most of them are pretty negative in terms of like it means like below or less than, or things like that. And that's what I spoke to, and I talked about sort of my journey to become the advocacy training coordinator for the council, but how I had to like I basically had to fight for 2 decades just to become employed, and though I have not worked sub minimum, I've still had to prove my value. And I talked about how, um, there's nothing sub about a person with a disability, and if a business excuse me, if a business deems a task necessary to accomplish, and they hire someone to accomplish that task, then they should be paid at least minimum wage, if not, much higher, right? Nothing below minimum, because there's nothing below, like, a person isn't below. We shouldn't have to prove our value because we have a disability. None of us choose to be disabled, right? So
Mhm.
I got to share that, and many others got to share their perspectives as well. So that was really great.
What's one thing that if you could go back and tell young Brad a message from you now, what nugget of knowledge would you share with young Brad that things might get a little easier with time?
Well, I don't know that things get easier with time, but I would encourage, if I could go back and talk to the young Brad, I would I would tell myself two things. Number one, don't eat as many snacks. And and number two, to take more risks. Um, I think there have been many times where I've sort of been, to be honest with you, been afraid, right?
Right.
Whether it's a social situation or a work situation or any situation. I've admittedly, sometimes I'm kind of, worst case scenario person, and you shouldn't live life that way. I mean, it might not turn out the way you want it to all the time, but taking that risk, and we talked about there's dignity in risk. um I think, who knows how some of the things that I've experienced might have been different had I just been willing to try things that were scary, right?
Right.
So, and it's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. And the disabilities magnify that, but keep going, right? Like, nobody signs up for it, but that's been the cards that we've been dealt. So we press on.
We'll have to go to a football game sometime, man, and hang out,
I don't know if, us together at a football game, they might kick us out for yelling too much. I don't know,
right?
Bryce.
You know, Summer might have to put up the bail money, that
They
might be
they wouldn't let you in the OU knowing you're an OSU grad and a Texas fan, which I still don't
hey,
understand that, so but that's okay.
this is a judgment-free podcast, alright?
I'm not I'm not judging, I'm just trying to figure it out, like, so.
So, I'm gonna ask the fan favorite question, and Summer knows that it's coming, and it's one of my favorite things that we talk about on the podcast. What do you want Dr. Brad Mays's legacy to be when you're no longer here?
Um, I think above all else, I want people to know, like, how much that I care, right? Like, I you know, it it's just, I'm very grateful for the people that have stuck by me, and I'm a person that loves deeply, and I care a lot, and I'm, uh, I'm a very emotional person, and I just, um, yeah, someone who's just given the best they can, and all, just giving their best. Like, that's what I wanna know, and, like, I want people to know, and maybe that inspires people, and if that does, then that's okay, so, yeah.
Brad, we've really enjoyed having you on today. I honestly wish we could talk a couple more hours because I have missed you. But before we go,
Sure.
do you have any last thoughts? Um, just like for anybody that's listening today, including like any young people that are, any kids, young kids that are out there today that have cerebral palsy. Anybody listening today, do you have any last thoughts for them?
Um, so to everyone that listens to this that doesn't have a disability, I would say, hey, if you don't know something about someone with a disability and you want to know, ask. Don't be afraid to ask. We're just people, right? just like legislators are people, people with disabilities are just people, right? We want to do things like everybody else does, and have we have aspirations that we want to achieve. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to talk to us. I promise I'm not scary. I promise. And I would love to answer your questions. And for those of you younger people who might have disabilities, and even older people and people my age, middle age, just just keep doing what you want to do, and every day is hard, every day is a challenge, but every day is a new opportunity, and just make the most of what you have. And I will say this too, don't compare yourself to others.
Right.
Run your own race, do the best you can, because we all have different circumstances, but we're all we're all made in God's image, and that's something that I always try to remember. We're here for a reason, and so maybe it's to be on a cool podcast like this. So
Well, we we have so enjoyed our time with you today, and, I know Bryce and I are both thankful that
yeah.
we
Well,
had
thank
the
you both for
opportunity
having
to
me.
know you.
I'm
So,
still I'm still I'm still honored that you've invited me, and I've enjoyed my
Absolutely.
hour with you, and I wish you guys continued success and much bigger and more famous guests than me, but really great to be a part of this. And
it's it's all
I've
downhill from here, Brad.
hey, if you're in a wheelchair, going downhill's good at least half the time. So,
It is. It
so
is. And we can laugh at that because we've experienced it, unfortunately.
oh yeah.
So,
Sometimes sometimes you spill out of that going down that hill, but,
yeah.
hey,
Sadly, yes, I've done that,
yeah,
yes.
so,
And
anyway,
on
well,
that note and on that note, this is where the ramp ends. I'm Bryce.
And I'm Summer.
And
thank
until
y'all.
next time, this is where the ramp ends and where your journey begins. Till next time, bye-bye.